The sound of his mother's wine glass hitting the marble floor is something I will carry with me forever. The way it exploded into 1,000 crimson pieces across the white tablecloth, staining everything it touched. She stared at me like I had pulled the ground out from under her feet. And I suppose I had. My name is Margaret Chen, and I am 64 years old. I spent 32 years as a forensic accountant for the state of Connecticut before I retired. I raised my daughter alone after my husband lost his battle with cancer when she was 9. And on Christmas Eve, in front of 250 of the wealthiest people in Fairfield County, I dismantled a family that had been lying to everyone for decades. But let me start from the beginning. Because this story does not begin with revenge. It begins with love. It was a Tuesday in late March when my daughter Sophie called me. She was 33, a fourth-grade teacher at Greenbrook Elementary, the kind of woman who spent her own money buying supplies for kids whose parents could not afford them. She had her father's gentle heart and my stubborn streak, though she would never admit it. "Mom," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I need to tell you something." I was sitting in my kitchen, the one I had lived in for 27 years, the same faded yellow curtains, the same chipped countertop I kept meaning to replace. I set down my tea. "What is it, sweetheart?" "I have been seeing someone. His name is Derek Hamilton. He is an investment manager at his family's firm. His family runs Hamilton Capital. They manage money for half the private clients in the state." My stomach dropped. I knew the name. Everyone in our part of Connecticut knew the name Hamilton. Philip Hamilton had built one of the most prestigious wealth management firms in New England. His wife, Constance, was on the board of every charity, every museum, every private school within 50 miles. They lived in a 12,000-square-foot colonial on 6 acres in Greenwich. They were the kind of family that appeared in magazines and expected you to be impressed. "How did you meet him?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "At a fundraiser for the school. His firm sponsored our literacy program. He came to the event and we started talking. He asked me to coffee the next day. Mom, he is wonderful. He listens to me. He remembers things I say. He does not treat me like I am beneath him." That last sentence broke my heart. The fact that she felt the need to say it, that not being treated as lesser was something remarkable, told me everything about what she expected from someone like Derek Hamilton. Over the next few weeks, Sophie talked about Derek constantly. He took her to restaurants I had only read about in reviews. He surprised her with flowers at school. He introduced her to his circle of friends at the country club. She was glowing. She was happier than I had seen her in years. And I wanted nothing more than to be happy for her. But something sat heavy in my chest. 32 years of examining financial records had given me a sense for things that did not add up. And something about this situation felt like a column that would not balance. I met Derek in May. Sophie brought him to my house for Sunday dinner, a tradition we had kept since she was a little girl. He arrived in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension. He was tall, sandy-haired, with the kind of confident posture that comes from growing up in rooms where everyone defers to you. "Mrs. Chen," he said, shaking my hand with practiced warmth. "Sophie talks about you all the time. I have been looking forward to this." His words were smooth, almost too smooth, like lines he had delivered 100 times in 100 different living rooms. During dinner, he talked about his work, the firm, his family's philanthropic efforts. He asked me polite questions about my career in accounting. But when I started explaining what forensic accounting actually involved, tracing hidden assets, uncovering financial fraud, identifying money that people tried to make disappear, his smile tightened, just slightly, just enough for someone like me to notice. When Sophie went to the kitchen to get dessert, he looked around my modest dining room. His eyes moved across the wallpaper that was peeling at the corners, the second-hand hutch where I kept my mother's china, the framed photos of Sophie at every age. And I saw it. That quick calculation behind his eyes, the mental appraisal, the quiet conclusion that everything in this room was worth less than his watch. I said nothing. Because Sophie was happy, and a mother will swallow a lot of things to protect her child's happiness. 3 months later, Derek proposed. Sophie called me sobbing with joy. "Mom, he did it, at the Hamilton estate, in their garden. His entire family was there." I said yes. I told her I was thrilled. Part of me was. But that night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. It was the same instinct I had relied on for 3 decades, that quiet alarm that went off when numbers told one story and people told another. The engagement party was held in September at the Hamilton estate. It was the kind of event that belonged in a film. Crystal chandeliers hung from a tent that covered the entire back lawn. A jazz quartet played beneath strings of white lights. Waiters in black vests circulated with champagne on silver trays. There were 200 guests, and every one of them looked like they had been born into money. I wore a dark green dress I had bought for my niece's wedding 3 years earlier. Sophie had offered to take me shopping for something new. I declined. I was not going to costume myself for people who would judge me no matter what I wore. When I arrived, Constance Hamilton met me at the entrance. She was in her early 60s, immaculately dressed in cream silk, her silver hair swept into a chignon, pearls at her ears and throat. She looked at me the way a museum curator looks at something that has been misfiled. "Margaret, how lovely that you could come. Sophie has mentioned you work with numbers. How practical. Well, the bar is just past the ice sculpture. Do enjoy yourself." She turned away before I could respond, her attention already captured by a couple arriving behind me in a black Mercedes. I stood there for a moment, feeling the sting of her dismissal, then straightened my shoulders and walked in. The evening was beautiful and completely suffocating. I watched Sophie move through the crowd, adjusting herself constantly, laughing a beat too late at jokes, agreeing with opinions I knew she did not hold, smoothing her dress as though she was afraid of taking up too much space. Derek kept his hand on her elbow, steering her from group to group like she was an accessory he was presenting. Then Constance took the microphone. "I would like to welcome everyone and say a few words about our newest family member," she began. Her voice was warm in the way that expensive candles are warm, controlled, decorative. Sophie is a delightful young woman, a school teacher. She works with children, which I think is just precious. She paused, and I felt my chest tighten. When Derek first told us he was seeing a teacher from a public school, I will be honest, we had certain expectations for his future. But Sophie has shown us that character can come from the most unexpected places. She may not come from our world, but we believe in giving people the opportunity to grow. And I am sure Sophie will rise beautifully to the Hamilton standard. She raised her glass. The guests applauded politely. Some even cheered. I looked at my daughter. Her smile had frozen. Her eyes were bright with tears she was fighting to contain. She knew exactly what had just happened. She had been complimented and diminished in the same breath, welcomed and reminded that she would never truly belong. And no one in that room acknowledged it. They just clinked their glasses and moved on. I drove home in silence that night. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I kept hearing Constance's words. Character can come from the most unexpected places. The opportunity to grow. Rise to the Hamilton standard. As though my daughter, my brilliant, generous, hard-working daughter, was a project, a charity case with a ring on her finger. And that was the night I made my decision. People who worked that hard to make others feel small were always hiding something. In 32 years of forensic accounting, I had never once encountered a family that projected perfection without burying something ugly beneath it. And I was going to find out what the Hamiltons were hooting. I started the way I always started, with the public record, property filings, court documents, corporate registrations, tax liens. I spent hours at the county clerk's office, at the state business registry, at the SEC's online database. I pulled every document connected to Hamilton Capital and its affiliated entities that I could legally access. I knew how to read financial structures the way a doctor reads an X-ray. I could see the fractures that most people missed. And I found fractures. Hamilton Capital had 17 subsidiary LLCs, which is not unusual for a firm that size. But the money flowing between them did not make sense. Large transfers were moving in circles, from one entity to another and back again, with no clear business purpose. Client accounts showed withdrawals that did not match any investment activity I could identify. On paper, the firm was managing over $600 million, but the numbers told a different story. The numbers whispered that a significant portion of that money was not where it was supposed to be. But I needed more than public records to prove it. So I reached out to an old colleague, a retired IRS investigator named Frank DeLuca. Frank and I had worked together on 3 separate fraud cases during my career. He was methodical, discreet, and he owed me a favor from a case in 2011 where my testimony had saved his investigation. I told him what I had found. He listened without interrupting. Then he said, "Maggie, this looks like a classic Ponzi structure. They are using new client money to pay returns to existing clients. The firm is bleeding. If you are right, this is not just fraud, this is federal." He agreed to look into it quietly. 2 weeks later, he called me back. "Margaret, you need to sit down." I sat. Philip Hamilton has been running this scheme for at least 8 years. He has diverted approximately $40 million in client funds into personal accounts. Some of it went to real estate, some went offshore, and some of it went to something else entirely. What do you mean? Philip Hamilton has been maintaining a second household in Stamford for 11 years, a woman named Teresa Vega. They have a son together. The boy is 10. Philip pays for the house, the private school, everything. His wife has no idea. I closed my eyes. 11 years. A whole second life, funded by stolen money, hidden behind the polished image of a man who lectured others about integrity and legacy. Frank continued, "There is more. 3 of the firm's largest clients are pension funds, teachers, firefighters, municipal workers. If this collapses, those people lose their retirements. We are talking about thousands of families." My hands were shaking. I thought about Sophie's colleagues at the school. I thought about the firefighters who had responded when my neighbor had a heart attack last winter. Their futures were sitting in accounts that were being drained by a man who spent his weekends on a yacht. "How long before authorities act?" I asked. Frank sighed. "I have passed what I can to the right people, but these investigations take time, months, maybe a year, maybe longer." I thanked him. I gathered everything, every document, every note, every connection I had traced, and I locked it all in the fireproof safe in my closet while I figured out what to do. For weeks, I agonized. If I told Sophie now, she might not believe me. She might think I was jealous, overprotective, trying to sabotage her happiness because I could not let go. And even if she believed me, confronting the Hamiltons privately would give them time to cover their tracks, move money, destroy evidence. People like Philip Hamilton did not get caught because someone asked them nicely to stop. They got caught because they were cornered. I talked to my closest friend, Ruth, a retired nurse who had been my neighbor for 20 years. We sat on her porch drinking tea while I laid everything out. "Maggie," she said quietly, "if you stay silent, you protect her feelings today, but you destroy her future, and everyone else's too." She was right, but I still could not bring myself to act, because every time I looked at my daughter's face, I saw hope, and hope is a fragile thing. I did not want to be the one to break it. Then, 2 weeks before the wedding, something happened that made my decision for me. I had gone to Sophie's apartment to drop off a box of her grandmother's jewelry. She wanted to wear her grandmother's brooch at the ceremony. Sophie was still at school, but I had a key. I let myself in, placed the box on her dresser, and was heading back down the hallway when I heard the front door open. Derek's voice, and another man's, his college friend, a guy named Trent who was going to be best man. I froze in the hallway, just around the corner from the living room. I should have announced myself. I should have walked out and said hello. But something in Derek's tone made me stop. It was loose, unguarded, the voice of a man who thought he was alone. "So, this is really happening, huh?" Trent said. "You are actually marrying the schoolteacher." Derek laughed. "It is genius if you think about it. Sophie is perfect. She is grateful. She is low maintenance. She does not ask questions. She has a steady paycheck, which matters right now because the firm is going through some restructuring, and she makes the family look good. My mother is all about optics, and having a daughter-in-law who teaches underprivileged kids is great for the brand." Trent chuckled. "And what about love?" "Love is a word people use when they cannot articulate what they actually need. What I need is someone stable, someone manageable, someone who will not make waves when things get complicated. Sophie checks every box. She is so happy to be part of the family that she will never question anything. She will just keep smiling and grading papers and being grateful." They laughed together. They moved to the kitchen. I heard the refrigerator open, the crack of beer cans. I pressed my back against the wall. My whole body was trembling, not with sadness, with rage. Pure, white-hot rage that started in my chest and radiated outward until my fingertips were buzzing. My daughter was not a person to this man. She was a line item, a strategic acquisition, a useful asset in a collapsing portfolio. I waited until they moved to the balcony. Then I slipped out the front door the moment it was clear. I drove home with my jaw clenched so tightly my teeth ached. That night, I did not sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with every document spread in front of me. And I made a plan. I was not going to tell Sophie privately. She would not believe me. She would think I was being the overprotective mother who could not let go. No, I needed to show her. I needed to show everyone. And I needed to do it at a moment when the Hamiltons could not control the narrative. The wedding was the Saturday before Christmas. The Hamiltons had transformed their estate into a winter wonderland, an enormous heated tent draped in white silk, 10,000 fairy lights, arrangements of white roses and evergreen boughs on every surface, 300 guests, a 12-piece orchestra. It was the social event of the season, and the Hamiltons had made sure everyone who mattered was watching. I arrived wearing black. Sophie noticed immediately. "Mom, what happened to the silver dress we picked out?" I hugged her tightly. I held her for a long time. "You look so beautiful, sweetheart. I will explain everything later. I promise you that." She was confused, but there were 100 things demanding her attention, and she let it go. I found my seat in the front row and I waited. The ceremony was stunning. Sophie walked down the aisle looking like an angel, her face radiant, her father's photograph pinned inside her bouquet where no one could see it but where she could feel him close. Derek stood at the altar with his practiced smile. Constance dabbed her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, performing grief she did not feel. Philip stood tall and proud, the patriarch, the pillar, the lie in a $10,000 suit. They exchanged vows. They kissed. The crowd erupted in applause. And then, we moved to the reception. Dinner was served, 7 courses, wine that cost more per bottle than most people's car payments. And then the toasts began. Philip spoke first, celebrating his son, his legacy, the continuation of the Hamilton name. Trent made jokes about bachelor days and growing up. And then Constance took the microphone. "Family is the foundation of everything we do," she began. "The Hamiltons have always believed in tradition, in excellence, in standards. And today, we welcome Sophie into our family." She paused, and I saw it coming. I know Sophie comes from a very different background than ours, more modest, more humble. But we Hamiltons believe in lifting people up. We believe everyone deserves a chance to better themselves. And I have no doubt that with our guidance, Sophie will become everything we hope for. The guests applauded. Sophie's smile cracked, just barely, just at the edges. But I saw it. I saw the exact moment she realized she would spend the rest of her life being reminded that she was not enough. And something inside me that had been coiled tight for months finally released. I stood up. My chair scraped against the floor. Constance noticed. "Margaret, did you want to say a few words?" "Yes," I said. "I do." I walked to the front of the room. 300 faces turned toward me. Sophie looked worried. Derek looked annoyed. Philip looked amused, the way powerful men look when they think they are about to watch something harmless. I stepped onto the platform and took the microphone from Constance's hand. She was too surprised to resist. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Margaret Chen. I am Sophie's mother. I spent 32 years as a forensic accountant for the state of Connecticut. For those of you who do not know what that means, I will tell you. I find money that people try to hide. I uncover lies that people bury in spreadsheets. I trace the truth through paper trails that were designed to lead nowhere." The room went very quiet. Constance took a step toward me. "This is completely inappropriate." I looked at her. "Is it? More inappropriate than telling my daughter she needs your guidance to become enough? More inappropriate than calling her background something to be overcome? While your family sits on a throne of fraud?" Her face went white. I opened my folder. I held up the first document. Philip Hamilton has been operating Hamilton Capital as a Ponzi scheme for at least 8 years. He has diverted approximately $40 million in client funds for personal use. Some of that money went to real estate. Some went to offshore accounts. And some of it went to support a woman named Teresa Vega and their 10-year-old son in Stamford, where Philip has maintained a second family for over a decade. The room erupted. Gasps. Whispers. Constance's hand flew to her pearls. Philip shot to his feet, his face the color of raw meat. That is a lie. That is a disgusting lie. I held up another page. These are bank records, wire transfers, property deeds and shell company names that trace directly back to you. I did not guess, Philip. I followed the money. That is what I do. I turned to the crowd. Among the clients whose funds have been compromised are 3 public pension funds, teachers, firefighters, municipal workers, thousands of families whose retirement savings are sitting in accounts that have been systematically looted. Someone in the back stood up and left. Then another. Then phones came out. The murmuring became a roar. I looked at Derek. And your son knows exactly what is happening. I heard him describe my daughter as a strategic asset, a low-maintenance investment who would never ask questions while the firm restructured. He called marrying her good for the brand. Derek's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Sophie was staring at him, and I watched the love drain from her eyes like water from a cracked vessel. I set the microphone down. I handed the folder to a woman I recognized as a reporter for the Hartford Courant. She had been invited as a guest, but I knew she would not leave as one. Everything is documented, I said. Every transaction, every transfer, every lie. And I walked off the stage. What followed was the longest night of my life. Constance collapsed into a chair, her perfect composure shattered. Philip tried to grab the documents, but the reporter had already photographed every page. His lawyer was on the phone within minutes, but it was too late. The information was out, spreading through the room like fire through dry grass. Derek chased after Sophie, who had fled the tent. I found her 20 minutes later, sitting on a stone bench in the garden, her white dress pooling around her in the December cold, her breath coming in ragged clouds. "Mom." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Is it true? All of it?" I sat beside her. I took off my coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. I held her hand. "Every word, sweetheart. I am so sorry. I am so sorry I could not protect you from this." She cried. She cried until her body shook, until her makeup was ruined, until the cold had turned her fingers red. And when she finally stopped, she looked at me with swollen eyes and said, "You did protect me. You protected me from spending my life with someone who never loved me. You protected me from becoming part of something rotten." I held her so tightly I thought my heart would crack open. The wedding was never completed. Guests scattered into the night. The reporter's story ran 3 days later, and within 48 hours, the FBI and the SEC had opened formal investigations. Within 2 weeks, Philip Hamilton was arrested on federal fraud and embezzlement charges. The pension funds filed civil suits. The story made national news. Constance filed for divorce the same week Philip was indicted. When reporters asked her for comment, she said she had known nothing, but the forensic trail told a different story. She had co-signed documents. She had benefited from accounts that were funded with stolen money. She was named in the civil suits. The estate was seized. The country club memberships were revoked. The woman who had told my daughter to rise to the Hamilton standard had no standard left to speak of. Derek tried to contact Sophie exactly once. He sent a long text message explaining that I had taken things out of context, that his words had been misunderstood, that he truly cared about her. Sophie blocked his number without replying. She did not need his explanations. She had heard what she needed to hear. For a while, Sophie was angry with me, not for revealing the truth, but for holding it until the wedding. She needed time to process the betrayal, the humiliation, the grief of losing a future she had believed in. I gave her space. I waited. I made Sunday dinners and left the door unlocked, just in case. 3 months later, she walked through that door. "Mom," she said, sitting at the kitchen table, in the same chair where she had first told me about Derek. "I understand now." "Understand what?" "Why you waited. If you had told me before the wedding, I would have fought you. I would have defended him. I needed to see it myself. I needed to see who they really were, in front of everyone, with nowhere to hide. I reached across the table and took her hand. "I was terrified of losing you," I said. She squeezed my fingers. "You are the only person who has never lied to me, not once in my entire life. I could never lose you." That was 2 years ago. Sophie is 35 now. She is engaged again to a man named Marcus Rivera, a firefighter she met when his engine responded to a small kitchen fire at her school. He showed up the next day with a new fire extinguisher and a shy smile. He asked her to dinner a week later. He comes to Sunday dinner every week now. He brings dessert. He washes the dishes before I can get to them. He looks at my daughter the way her father used to look at me, like she is the answer to a question he has been asking his whole life. I met his mother last month, a retired postal worker named Gloria who lives in Bridgeport. She hugged me the moment we met and said, "Thank you for raising the woman my son cannot stop talking about. I like her already." Philip Hamilton was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. The pension funds recovered approximately 70% of the missing money through asset seizures. It was not everything, but it was enough. 3 of the teachers at Sophie's school had their retirement accounts in one of the affected funds. When the recovery was announced, they brought me flowers. I cried in the faculty break room, which was embarrassing, but I did not care. Constance moved to Palm Beach. I heard she joined a new social circle there, reinventing herself. Some people never change. They just find new audiences. Derek lost his license. Last I heard, he was working in sales somewhere in New Jersey. I do not wish him harm. I just wish him far away from my daughter. Last Sunday, Sophie and Marcus came for dinner. Sophie waited until we were clearing the table, then she put her hand on my arm. "Mom," she said, her eyes were shining. "I am pregnant." I sat down because my legs would not hold me. 66 years old, and I wept like a child right there in my kitchen because my daughter was going to be a mother, and she was going to do it right, with a man who loved her, in a family built on truth. That night, after they left, I sat in my armchair by the window. The Christmas lights from the neighbor's house cast soft colors across the snow. I thought about Constance Hamilton with her pearls and her condescension and her empty life in Florida. I thought about Philip in his cell, finally stripped of the image he had spent decades constructing. I thought about Derek, who tried to use my daughter as a prop and ended up with nothing. And I thought about Sophie, my beautiful, resilient, extraordinary daughter, who walked through the fire and came out stronger on the other side. I learned something in all of this. Silence is not loyalty. Silence is not love. Silence is the thing that allows lies to grow until they consume everything. And the truth, even when it is terrifying, even when it costs you everything you have, is always worth telling. I am 66 years old. I spent my career surrounded by numbers, tracing patterns, finding what people tried to bury. I never expected to become the woman who brought down a dynasty at a Christmas wedding. But when they threatened my daughter, when they tried to reduce her to a convenience, I discovered something I had always known but never had to use. A mother's love does not negotiate. And a forensic accountant with 3 decades of experience is the last person you want to lie to. If you are hearing this, if you are in a place where powerful people are trying to make you feel invisible, remember this. You do not need their money. You do not need their approval. You do not need their permission to speak. You just need the truth and the courage to say it out loud. Because the truth does not care how rich you are. It finds you anyway.